4 Keys to Eternal Happiness.
Part 8. How to Love Others.
Hi. Through this lecture, you will learn the secrets to living a happy life for a lifetime. Additionally, you will get fundamental healing of body and mind, from depression to adult diseases. How to Love Others 1.
What is the secret of people who serve others?
Let me tell you about the secret to loving others as if they are my own body. First, I should tell you that dating is different from love. The reason everyone starts dating is to be loved. No one starts dating to give love to others. If someone is truly a loving person, why would the person date someone who is young, handsome, and has a good job, instead of someone who is poor? That's why you can't get what you want through date. Love should start only after both people are ready, so that neither of you gets hurt.
Then, what is the secret of those who sacrifice themselves for others, such as Jesus, Buddha, Mother Teresa, and Father John Lee?
First of all, you must keep this in mind. The saints did not consider their actions as sacrifices. Because their actions were not sacrifices, the saints were able to live lives devoted to others. In order to love others, you must first love yourself. You must be filled with love so that it can overflow and be shared with those around you. Among economic principles, the trickle-down effect has been concluded to not be applicable in reality, but the trickle-down effect of the mind is true.
Then how can I love myself? What is the difference between people with high self-esteem and ordinary people?
I will ignore the natural factors or parental influence. They are definitely influential, but those factors cannot be changed after birth. 1. The most important condition to love myself is health. A person with a healthy body is always happy without doing anything or receiving help from anyone. On the other hand, people who are physically unwell are always anxious and depressed. They have no choice but to depend on someone. In this state, they cannot love themselves and have no room to love others. Even if there is no clear disease name, if blood circulation is poor, you will experience weak pain and anxiety for no reason. Then people tend to turn their attention to something to forget the discomfort in their body and become addicted. Alcohol, cigarettes, stimulating foods, drugs, dating, gambling, games, and friends. 2. The second condition to love myself is a favorite job. The greatest joy in life is finding something you want to do and enjoying it to the fullest. Your life will be happy, and you can make money. At least you should have the first and second conditions before you start date, so that you don't fail. Look closely at people around you who are having trouble with relationship or marital conflict. It's not a matter of taste, but there is definitely something lacks. 3. The third condition to love myself is meditation. Meditation is staying in a state of happiness without relying on anyone or anything. Since you do not need anything else, you can reach a happy state through meditation whenever and wherever you want. When this becomes possible, you can be free from all kinds of stress and obsession. However, meditation is not for everyone. If you feel uncomfortable or have random thoughts when you close your eyes and lie down comfortably and do nothing, there is a reason. You should solve the cause before you begin meditation. The most common cause is health issues. That is why health is always the most important requirement. When you are prepared to these requirements, you can love yourself and live happily without the help of other people or objects. However, if you want to love others as yourself like Jesus or Buddha, this alone is not enough. How to love others too.
What further preparation is needed to love others unconditionally like the saints?
To grow in consciousness like the saints, you don't need to practice under a waterfall like monks or ascetics or read sutras for decades. Instead, just remember two things. 1. First, please remember this. We will return to this earth again, but we do not know whose children we will be born as. People instinctively want to leave a lot of wealth to their children. The reason is that when they reincarnate next time, their unconscious wants to live a life that is most similar to their current life. Because when they look back on this life, they have many regrets, so they want to turn back. In order to do that, the best way is to be born as a child of their descendants in the next life. This is because their current genetic characteristics and surrounding environment will be most similar to their descendants. However, this is only an unconscious wish and is close to impossible. The real protagonist of the book, I didn't believe in reincarnation, remembered hundreds of reincarnations, but never once was she born as her own descendant. So, this is how to prepare for reincarnation. The surest way for me to be happy in my next life is to make everyone in this world happy. If that happens, I can live a happy life in my next life, no matter whose child I am born as. Jesus and Buddha were different from ordinary people, precisely because they realized this secret. 2. To love others, you just need to keep one more thing in mind. Everyone's emotions are connected to mine. The surest way for me to be happy is to make everyone around me happy. Those who have experienced the intense feeling of first love will never forget the joy of that moment. The intensity of joy felt when two people who are together like each other and are both happy at the same time is incomparable to anything in the world. Here is why. Human emotions spread out to the surroundings as waves. When I feel happy, the happy waves spread out. The same goes for the other person nearby me. My happy waves are transmitted to the other person, and the other person's waves become larger. Then, the other person's larger waves are transmitted to me, and my waves become larger. This process is repeated endlessly, and happy emotions become infinitely larger. For lovers who truly love each other, sexual intercourse is only a very small part. King Gongmin of the late Goryeo dynasty loved Princess Noguk very much, even though he only had sexual intercourse a few times. I think the short pleasure of sexual intercourse felt insignificant because their hearts were connected. This state of ecstasy can last a lifetime if two people who have reached the point of loving themselves interact with each other. There is no more hurt or jealousy. And they come to realize this truth. The surest way for me to be happy is for everyone in the world to be happy. How to love others 3.
What you said seems correct in theory, but does that theory actually work in reality?
The reason why the saints were able to sacrifice for others is because they thought, everyone in this world is the same as myself. The reason is because they knew some laws of the world that others did not know. To explain this principle, let's take a recent social evolution as an example. When I was growing up in Korea, it was a time of military dictatorship. Workers worked like slaves, students were supposed to be punished, and women and children had to obey men and adults without question. All Koreans routinely gave nagging and verbal abuse to those below them. Many Koreans suffered from depression but did not know that they were sick. They thought it was natural to feel bad because the reality was gloomy. My parents' generation experienced war, and starvation was common. My grandparents' generation experienced Japanese colonial rule, Koreans during the colonial period could not eat rice. Many young women were taken to the battlefield as sex slaves, and many men were forcibly taken to Japan, worked, and never returned. My grandfather was one of them. My parents' generation lived better than my grandparents' generation, and my generation lived even better than that. The democratization movement became active in the 1980s, and through the sacrifices of many people, we overthrew the dictatorship and established a democratic country. The generation after me grew up in a world where both economic richness and human rights were abundant. Unfortunately, Korea still has the highest suicide rate in the world. That's why the younger generation thinks they are unhappy. But that's not true. The reason why Korea has such a high suicide rate is because of poverty among the elderly. The suicide rate among the younger generation is much lower than that of the elderly. And Koreans today have become much more generous and psychologically relaxed than when I was young. Korea's economic prosperity and human rights for the weak have grown dramatically in a short period of time. However, the reason why the younger generation feels that the world is harsh is because Korea is still in a transitional period. Depression spreads throughout all generations, so even people who grew up in good environments are psychologically affected by those around them. Korea has achieved remarkable economic and political development in a very short period of only a few decades. That is why the level of consciousness of the people is not keeping up with reality. When Generation Alpha, born after 2010, becomes an adult, the level of consciousness of the people will be more advanced than it is now, and they will be happier than Generation Z at least. They will be happy just by living in a democratic country, even if they are not better than others or have more. There were many sacrifices of pioneers to make Korea what it is today. Well-earned businessmen, capable lawyers, and prestigious university students could not stand injustice and entered the political arena to change the world. They did not give up even though the dictatorship continued to kidnap, imprison, and torture them. This is the goal that saints are pursuing. Everyone in the world becomes happy, so I can receive waves of happy energy. The next generation becomes happier, so I can live happily no matter whose child I am born as after I am reincarnated. Failing interpersonal relationships.
Why do I always fail at interpersonal relationships?
Let me tell you a story. I hope you can find a hint in this story. Hannah had been weak since she was a child. She was always lethargic and in poor health, so she wanted to depend on someone. Charlie was not loved by his parents as a child and suffered from depression. He had no motivation for anything and felt empty inside. Hannah felt motherly affection for Charlie when she met him. She wanted to comfort Charlie's wounded heart. In fact, Hannah wanted to rely on Charlie. Hannah wanted someone's attention. Hannah expected that if she became the person Charlie needed, Charlie would never leave her and would stay with her. Charlie was the same. He had been looking for someone to love him his entire life, and when he met Hannah, he was sure that,
finally, I found my heaven.
Hannah was so happy when she met Charlie that she imagined a happy future. Her hormones were secreted, and the placebo effect was working. Hannah showed her love to Charlie through actions, and the happy feelings were transmitted to Charlie in waves. Charlie was also happy to meet Hannah, and the happiness inside him was transmitted to Hannah in waves. Hannah and Charlie experienced each other's emotions being filled with joy when they were together. Unfortunately, Hannah and Charlie were not in good health. The placebo effect did not last long. Hannah, who was in bad health, returned to her old lethargic state. The waves that Hannah was transmitting to Charlie were no longer happy emotions. Charlie thought his depression was cured when he was with Hannah, but whenever something bad happened, his depression came back. Charlie was no longer happy when he was with Hannah. As time went by, when the two were together, they became more anxious and upset. This was because the depressed feelings in their hearts were transmitted to the other person as waves. They could not admit that they had problems in themselves and began to slander the other person. The two people, exhausted, decided to take some time. When they first broke up, their emotions were unstable. Because their current emotional state was unstable, memories of difficult moments came to mind. Hannah and Charlie each began to take care of themselves, and their emotions stabilized. As their emotions calmed down, memories of happy moments came back to them. Charlie wanted to go back to the happy times and asked Hannah to give him another chance. By then, Hannah had also found stability and was missing the early days of dating. The two met again and repeated the same process again. They shared love and happiness with each other, were disappointed with each other, and cursed each other. The two broke up, but after some time they found stability again. And this time, Hannah reached out first. The two repeated the same process again and became complete strangers after that. The reason why the two people failed in their interpersonal relationships was because of themselves. The reason why Hannah and Charlie failed in their interpersonal relationships was because they were not healthy. When you are not healthy, you want to receive more love than you want to give to the other person. Successful interpersonal relationships.
Did the two people realize the cause of the problem and solve it on their own?
Charlie thought that Hannah was the reason his relationship with her failed. In Charlie's mind, he wasn't responsible, so there was no reason for him to make effort. After that, Charlie met Jane. Jane was an active and positive person in everything. Charlie and Jane loved each other. Charlie didn't want to let Jane go and relied on her a lot. Jane was very patient, but as time went by, Jane could not handle Charlie relying on her. Eventually, Charlie was left alone again. This time, Charlie thought that his relationship with Jane had failed because of Jane. Since then, Charlie has met new people, loved, fought, and broken up repeatedly.
Charlie failed to look back at himself. What happened to Hannah?
After breaking up with Charlie, Hannah became lost in thought. She also thought that Charlie was the cause of her failure. In Hannah's opinion, she had no reason to try because she was not responsible. After that, Hannah met John. John was a thoughtful and considerate man. Hannah was now sure that she had found her soulmate. At first, they both loved each other, but Hannah relied on John, and eventually John got tired of it and left. Hannah couldn't understand why she had failed love with John, who was obviously a good guy. She thought she was just unlucky and vowed not to fail next time. After that, Hannah met Simon, but their relationship did not last long. Like all relationships before, after spending happy times with Simon, Hannah became bored, started slandering him, and became alone again. Hannah was in deep thought. John and Simon were both good people. They were kind, patient, and considerate. She had failed twice in relationships with good people, so she thought it wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't the other person's fault. Finally, Hannah concluded that there was something wrong with her. Hannah looked back on her childhood. As a child, she was full of energy, smiled often, and was kind to people. The time when Hannah became distant from her friends coincided with the time when she became depressed. After much thought, Hannah discovered that her health affected her interpersonal relationships. Since then, Hannah has worked hard to make her health a top priority. After much trial and error, she found a health method that suited her and changed all her lifestyle habits to be healthy. After a few years, Hannah became healthy and no longer unhappy. She no longer had to rely on others. She gladly helped those around her and did not expect anything in return. The men around her were attracted to Hannah's warm heart and positive energy. Several of them confessed their love to her, but she rejected them all. She learned from experience that a relationship that relies on the other person only causes harm to both. Shortly thereafter, Hannah happened to meet John on the street. When she broke up with John, Hannah had resented him for leaving her. Now Hannah has forgotten all the resentment towards John. Instead, she felt sorry for John. Hannah thought,
I am different now than I used to be, and I am confident that I can repay John if we get back together.
John was also happy to see Hannah. He was willing to get back together if Hannah asked him out on a date. Hannah thought a lot for a very short time and eventually just said goodbye to John. Just as she failed to reunite with Charlie, there was a very high chance that she would return to her old, helpless self if she reunited with John. Rather than risk hurting John again, Hannah chose to keep it as a good memory. A few months later, Hannah joined a volunteer group and continued to meet David, whom she had met. Hannah didn't expect much from David and didn't give him much love. David was the same. David was an active person and did his own works. They didn't give each other much love, but they didn't expect it from each other. Just being together was a joy. The happiness of the two lasted for a long time. Although the two had different hobbies and tendencies, it was not a problem. Because both of them were healthy, they always transmitted happy waves to each other. Hannah finally found physical health, peace of mind, and stability in her relationships. Sometimes Hannah thinks of John and hopes that he will meet a good person and be happy. Whenever she remembers a difficult moment in the past, Hannah thinks of Charlie. Hannah wishes Charlie could do what she did. She wishes Charlie could find the cause of his problems in himself and solve his own problems. In Hannah's imagination, Charlie smiles happily. Thank you for attending this lecture. See you in the Part 9.